vampire lolitas, dapper werewolves, time-traveling Bushido warriors, samurai cats, squirrel girls, and snake-tossing knife artists. Welcome to another super ranking! This time we're deviating from the Guilty Gear series and dropping the Z-axis, so it's back to 2 dimensions. Now, unlike Guilty Gear, I'm not nearly as familiar with BlazBlue, either in terms of lore and story, nor the characters or mechanics in general. So, please bear with me, as these rankings are going to be pretty much based purely on aesthetics and cool factor. Also, speaking of, if anybody watching this can in any way explain to me what the hell is up with BlazBlue's story, I'd love to hear it. Given the massive cast and vast number of moves we're going to be looking at, between all of the distortion drives, exceed excels, astral finishes, it just wouldn't be practical to rate each move one by one. So instead, I'm going to be doing this character by character, based on an aggregate ranking of all of their moves taken together. Also, I'm actually going to be placing all of the characters on an overall relative ranking, not just rating each one individually in a vacuum, like I did with the Strive video. Due to the aforementioned number of characters, I'm going to be splitting this up into a few separate videos, since putting this all together in one video would probably set my poor little PC on fire trying to render it, and let's face it, I don't want to ask any of you lovely people to sit through an hour and a half straight of me rambling. As always, a brief disclaimer. The opinions stated in this video are just and only that, my opinions. I don't pretend to understand anything about the way fighting games work on a mechanical level, so please don't censure me for not bringing up things like frame data or employing any of the crazy moon speak that's endemic to the FGC. Finally, let me explain the 3 different types of moves that each character is going to be graded on. First, there's the Exceed Excel, which is a sort of basic super move that every character has. There are Distortion Drives, which is BlazBlue's name for regular super moves, with distinct inputs and properties for everyone. And there are Astral Heats, which is the BlazBlue version of Guilty Gear's famous instant kill attacks. These are the big ones, the ones with the cinematic cutaways and jaw-dropping effects. At least, that's what you hope. As ever, thank you for lending me your time and attention. If you enjoy yourself, a like is greatly appreciated, a comment and or subscription even more so. Anyways, that's more than enough preamble. Let's get to it. Check out some supers. Number 36, Carl Clover. And so it begins. At the bottom of the list we have the boy in the top hat. Alas for Carl, but compared to most of the cast, he really just doesn't bring the thunder. His supers on the whole just lack punch. There's the Exceed Excel, where he drops what looks like a large flower vase onto his opponent. The Distortion Drive, where he grinds you with his gears that doesn't even knock you down. The anonymous One Big Uppercut. And an admittedly kinda cool, albeit equally not very distinctive, long combo from his servant guardian thing, Nirvana. His astral finish is the most interesting out of all of his offerings, although frankly that's not saying much. The opponent is dropped into what I can only assume are the inner workings of some giant clock tower and ground into paste. On paper, as I'm typing this, it sounds kinda cool. In practice, it didn't really do much for me. Sorry, Carl. Number 35, Lambda 11. Next up is the first of what I think of as the Hovering Sword Princesses. All of these characters have similar movesets with a few distinctions between the 3 of them. Her Exceed is a fairly bland series of backflip kicks that lack much in the way of impact. Her first Distortion Drive flings a barrage of small swords at you, which even the character on the receiving end of doesn't look especially impressed by. The next one is just a single big sword that drops onto your head, and this same concept is replicated by her Astral Finish. While this attack does feature a nifty cinematic startup, it doesn't even show the giant sword's impact, and so not with a bang but with a resounding meh, she comes in at 1 stop from the bottom. Number 34, New 13. In this instance, 11 plus 1 is apparently 13, because number 34 on our list is another hovering sword princess, new 13. Her slate of attacks is largely the same, so this is going to be fairly similar to the last entry. Her Exceed pokes the opponent in the back of the head with a disappointingly brief flurry of blades. Her first distortion is a much more impressive version of the drop a large sword on their head concept, this time with a cascade of swords. Her other distortion is the same blade barrage as her Exceed, just from the front this time. One has to wonder where she keeps them all. And finally, for her Astral, we get that exact same giant sword drop as the previous entry, which begs the question, who's the copycat? It's only that first distortion drive, which is exactly 3 swords cooler looking than Lambda 11's version, that nets her the next spot up on the list. Number 33. Hakumen. Oh, Hakumen, why must you disappoint me so? Such a cool character design, such a lukewarm assortment of super moves. I was so disappointed by it, in fact, that I just completely gave up on trying to write jokes for this segment. His Exceed is a pretty bland 3-hit combo, something that looks like it could easily be a, command throw in Soul Calibur. The first distortion is just a big overhead bash. I would recommend you go see Nagoriyuki from Guilty Gear Strive for remedial lessons on that. His next distortion is a counterattack, and thus I'm salty because it took me forever to pull off while trying to film it. Looks okay. It's got that anime style, you're already dead, and then the guy looks down and realizes he's been cut in half flair to it. But he doesn't even sheath the sword and say something cool afterwards. Finally, his Astral is also a counter and just covers the screen in black stuff. Not impressed at all. Moving on. Number 32. Izayoi. This vivacious lance-wielding Valkyrie is our next entrant, and she comes with a bevy of rather mediocre attacks, and one pretty sweet one. For her Exceed, she gets a short combo using her little floating blade bit things, which looks like it hurts about as much as someone trying to cross-cut you with a pair of butter knives. Her first distortion is a pretty lackluster one big stab with a giant version of her handheld lance. Her second summons 2 floating spearheads to accompany her, which proceed to poke and prod you in various angles alongside her normal attacks. Finally, let's take a look at her Astral Heat, which is actually kinda cool. Her skirt armor gets a pair of jets, and she hurls her lance, writ large and bewinged, into you for the big finish. It's okay, but I can't help feeling like it would be more fun if she were, surfing on it or something. Number 31. Platinum, the Trinity. Platinum is a very sweet-looking young lass, and while it pains me to crush her hopes and dreams, she comes in near the bottom of the list at number 32. Her Exceed has her hopping aboard her giant wand thing and plowing into you a couple of times. An attack that I feel like even real-life me could withstand without too much wincing. Her first distortion batters you repeatedly. She spins so fast she becomes a little blonde blender before throwing a bunch of plushies at you. Her second distortion is at least one of the most interesting so far. It alters the properties of her character-specific drive attacks, maximizing them. So her little wand becomes a giant hammer. Her .22 caliber cat bullets become jet-propelled mortar shells. And her teddy bear Morningstar becomes a wrecking ball even Miley Cyrus would envy. Finally, her astral heat starts up with a cinematic ode to her magical girl stylings, before blasting you with a giant, if somewhat anonymous, laser. While it ends with a decent bang, it's not enough to get her off the ground floor. Number 30. Tsubaki. Our 31st entry is an archer wearing a winged hat, which if BlazBlue took place on the Discworld would mean she was the Postmaster General. Alas for Tsubaki, instead of a civic office in Sir Terry's wonderfully weird world, all she gets is a spot near the bottom of our list. Her Exceed has her hit you in the face with a big finish from a Pink Floyd laser light show, which I assume does damage by searing her opponent's corneas shut. Her first distortion pins you against one side of the screen before she bashes you in the face with the book she wears on her arm, and her second is a variation on that theme, much the same, except she pokes you afterwards. Neither looks like it hurts very much. Her next attack flings a flurry of elaborate metalwork at your face, which at least by comparison seems like it would do some decent damage. Finally, her astral, which is actually pretty sweet, has her conjure up a giant woman out of light and impale her opponent with a similarly large, lucent spear. Overall though, her kit lacks bombast, and so she stays near the basement. Number 29. Arakune. The 29th entry on our list is the disgustingly odd Arakune. He's a blob who's all about the bugs. His Exceed is a quick one and done as he turns into a BDSM version of Vile Plume and swallows the opponent up before vomiting them back out, which incidentally is the reaction I had to his first distortion drive. This attack sees him becoming a giant spider and blasting the opponent upwards with a laser fired from some sort of arachnoid aperture on his back. His second distortion is purely practical. A swarm of tiny insects apply his curse effect, which I'm sure is handy, but that's not what we're here for. His third distortion similarly lacks visual impact, but gets points anyway because I find it kind of hilarious. Just the number of times this giant bug he summons hits you. It keeps going. Anyways, finally his astral heat. It's one of those really abstract attacks that I barely even know how to describe, much less attach a rating to. I guess swarmed by giant ocular centipedes would be a pretty puzzling thing to see on a headstone. Next. Number 28. Rachel. Rachel Alucard is a vampire, to no one's surprise, I hope, and has that whole blasé anime bloodsucker thing going for her. Her Exceed sees her whipping up a whirlwind while she sips on a cup of tea, and is one of her better looking attacks. Her first distortion conjures a giant bolt of lightning, and while I'm a sucker for electricity-based attacks, it's a bit one and done. This can be called down either on her position, or grounded into a series of lightning rods that she throws out. Her second distortion is what I can only describe as a mascot barrage, as she hurls the cast of off-brand Sesame Street across the screen. Finally, her astral finish is pretty much just the cover of an early 2000s alt-rock band's first album, and thus actually kind of impressive that she manages to do damage with it. Number 27. Mew 12. In our last entry on today's list, we're finally starting to get into the good stuff. Mew 12, the blonde, barely clad third member of the Floating Sword Princess Triumvirate, managed to make it a bit further up the list than her two partners in design. While she does share certain things with Lambda and Nu, her moves are, in general, more interesting. Her Exceed is a massive cruciform blast of azure light that wouldn't look out of place in Evangelion. I wouldn't call her an angel though, she's nowhere near abstract enough. Her first distortion is a tripartite barrage of energy bolts that actually has decent impact and looks suitably cool. She is, however, let down by her second distortion, which has the little floating helpers she can summon fire off a single, pathetic little energy spitball. While I've omitted showing the numerical ratings that I assigned each attack so far, mostly because I didn't want to have to justify them, I'll do so in this case. It was a 1. She does, however, bring it back with her astral. Unlike the other two, instead of a single sword and a lackluster ending, we get a full battery of broadswords, and the satisfaction of actually getting to see them hit home. Alrighty, that is our first 10 from BlazBlue Central Fiction. Next time, well, it'll be the next 10. Was anybody surprised by that? As ever, thank you for lending me your time and attention. If you enjoyed the video, a like is greatly appreciated, a comment and/or subscription even more so. If you do subscribe, please remember to ring the bell for updates. Take care, until next time, this is November Bravo. Over and out.